Okay, so welcome back to the next lesson. We're going to talk about how to create healthy boundaries with your clients. And really, we only encounter this problem when our boundaries or our kind of rules that we've not shared or even clarified for ourselves, when those have been broken or people have overstepped boundaries. So you might not be experiencing this yet, but it absolutely will become an issue. The more clients that you work with, those boundaries will be tested and you have to get clear on them before you can communicate them. So we're going to talk about 5 things. What happens if you do not set boundaries? Why you don't set them? How to start, so actually understanding what a boundary actually is, then how to have that conversation with your clients, and then going forward, how to keep refining, implementing, and keeping yourself honest, and what that means then for you and your clients as well. So let's dig in. What happens if you don't set boundaries? You increase the stress because what happens is you run after everybody else at their time, at their schedule, rather than looking after yourself. Second is you will build up resentment because people overstep a rule or a line, but they don't know that you have that line or that rule. And so that feels like they don't respect you. So then you resent the other person, but it's because you haven't established that line for yourself or that boundary for yourself, and they haven't understood it or you haven't told them. The next is burnout. If you don't have a boundary around your time, everything goes anytime. So that's going to burn you out because you have to have times where you can recharge, renew, refresh, and spend times on the other priorities that you have in your life. You also may want to consider giving up the work that you do because you're associating the emotions of stress, resentment, burnout with the work that you care about. So for example, I thought I'd feel more. It could be positive, more motivated, more inspired when I'm doing this work, but I'm burned out. I'm more stressed and I don't like that people are always looking for me. Again, these are absolute symptoms of a problem of not having clear boundaries up front. And then as well, when you have no boundaries or guardrails around you and your business and how clients can interact with you, it leads to chaos because there's no structure. So no boundaries also mean that for you and your clients, you don't have what's called psychological safety. So you can't, if people don't have the space to have a conversation that's adult, well, then they're going to not feel safe or maybe hold stuff back. And so will you, because you don't feel safe enough to share these things because you haven't given the boundaries around your time, your energy, your attention, what's appropriate for the conversations, and all of those kind of things. So these are some of the things that don't happen or absolutely happen if we don't set boundaries. So why don't you set them? Typically, if you are in a scarcity type mindset, you are afraid of losing the client because if you put up rules and your clients say, nah, you're all right, I don't want to come back to you, well, then you're going to potentially feel like you're going to lose the client, and you might. And if you are clinging to every client that you have because you feel scarcity rather than an abundance type mindset where literally the clients are everywhere, well, then it's easy to have that as one of the reasons why you don't set clear rules around your time, your energy, your attention, your priorities, because you don't want that to impact any clients kind of working with you. But actually, if you establish clear boundaries for yourself, so maybe just to undo this point, if you establish clear boundaries for yourself, that actually permits clients to do that for themselves. So you actually set them a better example by your example. You can lead in this space, offer them these opportunities to do that for themselves as well, but you can role model that. Also, when we think about our role as a coach or as a human, we have these bullshit stories of what it means to be a coach or a human that we've never examined, but that becomes our mode of operating. So for example, I've heard this in coaching conversations recently. I must get back to all my clients every time, or I return every call, or in our WhatsApp group, I reply all day, or a kind of closed minded, fixed mindset type statement. That's just who I am. Or it's because I care so much, or even I care too much. These are bullshit stories. You can care about people and have boundaries. It's not a one or the other. You can get back to clients when it's right for you and have clients that feel that you care about them. These things are not one or the other, care or boundaries, time with all the time on, or boundaries. Like These things play out as an and, not an or. The other reason why you don't set boundaries, you are not clear of your own standards yourself. And you only become clear of these things when somebody steps on your toes or steps on this boundary. Then you go, that's outside my rule, or that's not right according to me. But if people don't know, they don't know. So the way to interact with it is not to have people step on them, but to actually think back for yourself. What are the things that I want to set up as boundaries around myself? And then you better able to communicate that clearly so that people don't step on that. And really why you don't set them as well is putting yourself first, having a boundary or standard you aren't used to or don't think that you deserve. You do deserve to have boundaries. You can put yourself first. What a concept. You can put yourself first and have clients that feel that you value and care for them. You deserve it. And not feeling like you don't deserve to create boundaries and that level of self-respect within yourself is a story you can tell a new one. So create a new story where it's true that you can look after yourself, have clear lines of boundaries, and you can care about your clients. So how to start? What's a boundary? From Psychology Today, a really kind of well-reputable publication, they say boundaries are an invisible line you draw around yourself to show what is acceptable behavior and what is unacceptable. They're meant to protect both your emotional space, your energy, and your priorities. And your boundaries are those non-negotiables, the standards and rules for how people work with you. So that's just some insight into what a boundary is. Let's look at a little bit more detail. Getting clear on the boundaries for yourself comes first, because otherwise, what happens is you show yourself less respect because you're willing to be everything for everyone. And that means then that people will take you for granted because they won't know the line that you've drawn because you haven't drawn it. So they'll push and they'll push and they'll want more and they'll expect more. But it also teaches them not to respect you if you don't draw that line and respect yourself by creating those boundaries around yourself. If people don't have the map for what it means to be respectful working with you and your time and honoring your time, your energy, and your priorities, we can't expect them to just understand what your standards are. So we must get clear on this for ourselves. So for example, questions like, what is important to me? What are my needs? What are my priorities? What are the rules I want to establish around my time, my energy, and priorities? Get really clear on your answers to those questions. And then we look at how to communicate them. So how to have the conversation. Again, this is an adult to adult conversation. You're not a parent talking to a child, you as the coach, them as the client, and parenting and telling them what's acceptable behavior. You're having a conversation where you're saying, these are the rules for operating with me. I want you to understand them. You don't have to react in a perfect way. Typically, people's reactions to these things are their own business. They're not up to you to decide or to take responsibility for. Your responsibility is on communicating them clearly and succinctly, and we'll talk about that. So once you are clear on your priorities, then you figure out your boundaries for each of the relationships, like coach, like parent, like son, like daughter, any of those kind of things. Then you communicate them. So you externalize it. So you do it clearly, firmly, and in as few words as possible. You do not negotiate your boundaries. They're not up for sway. They are your boundaries. They are the clear rules for working with you. You don't have to explain them. If you do want to, you can say some of the reasoning behind why you've decided it. For example, instead of saying something like, you have to stop calling me in the evenings, you could say instead, I need time from myself and my family in the evenings, so I won't be checking my messages until the following day. Again, these are the same things that are happening. They're just different ways of communicating them. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, you can practice in private what you need to perform in public. So find peers, colleagues, friends, family, somebody or a coach like that. For example, I'm happy to be a person you can practice with before you have to have this live conversation. Do not expect that conversation to go perfectly in those practice sessions or even in the live conversations. It evolves. Your boundaries will also evolve. They're like water. They're not a clear wall that you draw. They're a fluid kind of thing that adapts over time. So be okay with that and start small. Then you build up to larger boundaries because you build in the confidence to yourself and you state why your boundaries are important and make sure to follow through. If you do not kind of cut people or call out when people are not meeting your standard or your boundary, well, then that becomes the new boundary. So it flexes to them rather than you drawing a clear line of that is unacceptable. That's not the lines that I've drawn. So again, state why it's important and make sure to follow through. And then going forward, you are responsible for setting your boundaries respectfully. You're not responsible for how the other people react. False responsibility around the wrong things will lead to shame and guilt. And so recognize that these might come up and accept that. That's okay. So you're creating these standards for yourself. And if you don't meet them, there may be shame and guilt because you don't even know clearly what your standards are. So don't take responsibility for things that are not your responsibility or that you haven't gotten clear of what to take responsibility for. For an example, if you have a standard that you will always give to other people, and then there comes a point where you're in hospital and you have to look after yourself, you will feel guilty that you're not able to meet that standard. But that's a false responsibility. You cannot take responsibility in that situation for always getting back to everyone or always being there for everyone. There has to be a balance. It can be an and. You can care. You just draw a different line. You care about everybody once you look after yourself, for example. So then you look after yourself and you care about other people and you have a clear boundary around that. Those can all exist at the same time. We think it's one or the other. It's absolutely not. And your boundary might look different than mine, might look different than your clients. So that's okay. Allow that difference and have a conversation about it if you have to. Accept and respect that other people have different boundaries too. And respect is a two-way street. So make sure to pay attention to that. And then here are some boundaries or ideas just to get you started. So consider your timekeeping, what good timekeeping looks like for your clients, but also for you. And make sure then that that's the standard that you set and that you embody it and you live by it. Another boundary to set is what you will and won't cover or speak about in conversations. So maybe it's check-ins, maybe it's accountability updates, what's within scope and what's outside of scope. Get really clear on what that is and what your role is. You're not a counselor, you're a coach. You're not a CBT expert, you're a coach. You focus on fitness, potentially some mindset, but you might not. Another boundary is when you will get back to clients and when you won't. So again, those boundaries around yourself will allow you to switch off and feel like you have more work-life balance. And what you will do and what you will not do for clients. For me, for example, nutrition is not something I will do for clients. I don't know about it. I don't know enough. I eat chocolate all the time. I'm not a good example for nutrition. Why would I give that advice? But mindset, leadership, communication, confidence, public speaking, all that kind of stuff. Absolutely what I can do for clients. So get clear on that for you. There are a couple of suggestions to talk through when you want to try and create some healthy boundaries. But hopefully that was helpful. Look forward to the next conversation and speak soon in the next lesson.